I have the pleasure actually of doing a prelude, and the prelude is for a panel we're going to have with 3 CEOs from a company called ThoughtSpot, ASAPP, and Factory AI. And what I wanted to talk about today is that what we as McKinsey Company see happening on the enterprise side. And the reason that is interesting for you is that enterprise is actually, those are the customers of AI. That's where the big volumes and big actually usage of AI will come from. So the title is Thesis 2025. And what I will not do, I will not bore you with use cases because I think we all seen like tens of different use cases, but I'll actually present principles. And the reason I'll present principles is that the change is so fast at the moment that we all see new models coming daily. We see new use cases coming daily. So I want to talk about what does it feel like when you're sitting at the helm of a big company. So where can you actually use AI and at what speed? So if there's something coming out from here, I hope you remember those principles and what they mean. So last year, I was on this same stage, and I talked about what's happening in AI. And we said that 2024 onwards will be all about agents and workflows. And I think we can all confirm that, right? You go 1 year after, it's all about agents, and it's all about workflows. The past year also, when you look at it, was quite remarkable. If we look at simply the amount of large-scale models launched, we actually surpassed 23. When you then deep dive into those models, we're actually still on the same scaling curve, meaning we spent 4.5 times as much compute training those models than we did the previous year. And actually, what people don't necessarily recognize always, the amount of compute needed to reach the same level as a year before, it actually goes to 1/3 every year. So you could say the compute efficiency of training the LLMs triples every year. DeepSeek is a good example, right? It's quite a natural development. It caught many by surprise, but if you just look at the scaling laws, that's where we are. And also in a year, we got them numerous, actually quite exciting features. We have reasoning. We did not have reasoning, or what we today call test time compute a year ago. We have tool usage. So we actually have products like OpenAI's Operator or a similar product from Anthropic. And finally, we have applications like deep research that are fundamentally changing the way we process information. So it's been remarkable development. Our belief, and I'm going to drop you a few big numbers right now that I think are important in my mind. Our belief as McKinsey Company that by 2030, we can automate 50 to 70% of the tasks in the economy. Notice tasks in the economy. And I'll come soon how that works. The prerequisite for that is, of course, that we can perform at a certain level. What you see here on a slide are a few benchmarks. So we have GPQA, we have AME, which is a mathematics benchmark, we have ArcAGI, which is a reasoning benchmark, and then we just have code forces. So basically a coding benchmark. If we look at the leading frontier models, which in this case is O3 in all of these examples, we're way past human performance, right? Does that translate to real-time or real-world impact? Answer is it does not yet. There's very few companies who've seen a single dollar from large enterprises because of Gen AI, and I'll talk more about what and why. But we do see the potential. So like I said, 50 to 70% of tasks will be automated. This will translate to about up to 25 trillion impact in a global economy. Remember, global economy is about 100 trillion, so it's a 25% uplift in productivity. There's a similar uplift for companies, and we believe actually the software industry will double because of this. So there's an additional 500 billion of revenues for the Gen AI-based software industries. But there will be also other effects. If you just play out this equation and you ask that what does it mean for the labor force, even if you assume that there's similar job creation as there's job losses, unemployment will increase by 5 percentage points. Something we do not discuss yet, but it will come. However, there's a but here in the equation, right? It sounds very rosy. It sounds really great if you're an investor or if you're a Gen AI company. However, as you see from here, most companies are implementing Gen AI. However, only about a quarter of companies feel like they made meaningful progress. And of that 25%, When you look at companies who have truly scaled Gen AI, it is 10%, and only 5% have then done end-to-end workflows, meaning something, for example, from production to a customer. So looked at a more holistic process. So we're still at very early innings in getting the enterprise change going on. And why enterprise change is important is that that's where the money is, and that's where the benefits will come from in the long run. Here's an example why so. So this is actually one of the world's largest software companies. They tried to use GitHub Copilot, right? You all know what a GitHub Copilot is. What the graph there shows is GitHub Copilot active daily users across their software development arm. You see that at around 3 to 4 month mark, retention drops almost to 0. So even at one of the most largest, most progressive software development houses in the world, developers were not using GitHub Copilot. Why is that? The reasons are actually quite numerous. Number one, many times we scale these tools with a tool focus, right? We give a tool to person and say, please use this tool. Well, you might be interested or you might not be interested. Second, integration to the existing environments. This is the existing systems, getting the data into the systems, et cetera, is often limited. Third, there's a lot of individual reluctancy. Actually, when we surveyed developers, there's 2 interesting features. One is that about 80% of developers feel that it does not meaningfully change their job. And then there's a small minority that even are afraid of using the tools because they feel the fear of displacement. And then finally, what we see is that the management system, meaning how people are managed and how they're incentivized to use the tools, are not in place. And these are real-world problems that exist in large organizations. So there's inertia, there's reluctancy to take solutions into use. Thus, if you pretty much look at any company in the world, we still do not have large-scale implementation of Gen AI companies or Gen AI in companies. And I've had probably about 7, 8 discussions here with startups, with technology companies who have amazing technology, where the big problem is that we don't find customers just because we haven't implemented, for example, other Gen AI technologies at scale that would be required for us to sell our solution in. Why is this then an opportunity? It's very simple. If you go back 10 years and you look at so-called digitalization meaning when mobile became a channel, right? When we started to move our infrastructure to cloud. Actually, what we found across industries are the following 3 effects. Number one, every industry faced some value destruction, meaning revenues and EBIT got squeezed. The value moved to the end customer. It's a pretty universal phenomenon. Number 2, those companies in an industry that moved early, they had an advantage. They actually offset the revenue growth. And number 3, there was a much clearer distinction between the leaders and others in the industry based on how aggressively and with what ambition you invested. And those companies reaped disproportionate benefits. What we're seeing, and again, it's early innings, that these phenomena will get pronounced at the era of AI. It will be even larger than in the era of digitalization. So we believe as McKinsey Company that there's a real cause and reason to act. To act, we come to our favorite topic. We come to agents and Gen AI agents. First question, what are agents? I have a very simple view. Agents have agency, right? What does it mean to have agency? Having agency means that you can shape and take actions against a set objective. When we then look at more technology-wise, it also means that we need certain capabilities. We will need language. We will need collaboration, reasoning, etc. Some of these are already there today. Some are still very limiting factors. So for example, if I pick on one, learning, error correction, and adaptability, very much limiting factors still today, even when you look at the best frontier models. They are not good in, for example, spotting their own hallucinations, correcting that, etc. So we still have fundamental work to do. And here comes then, how do you think about it as an investor, as a tech startup, or as an enterprise? In a very simplistic way, I divide agents into 2. One are transactional agents, second is transformative agents. Transactional agents, in my language, are agents that you can adapt or adapt to an existing enterprise, existing process or workflow, right? Transformational means that we need to rethink the way we're running a company. For example, making a company AI native. Just to stay a moment on the transactional ones, one example is individual augmentation. These are the co-pilots of the world, right? We all know them. Like, you use a tool as an individual. It is great, it makes people happy, but there's very limited impact from that because we're changing individual at a time in a company. Second is task and workflow automation platforms. Think of it like, if I simplify, RPA on steroids. These are just now coming to market. So we're still at very early stage. So if you look at the big companies like Salesforce's Agentforce, it's not really at a widespread production yet. If you look at Microsoft Copilot Studio Agents, it is also not in production. It's in early launch still. But these platforms are coming. What they're great at is automating existing tasks in existing workflows. So we're taking small chunks of labor away. The difficulty but it will be really difficult to scale. Third category are domain-specific journey and workflow redesign. My friends who are coming on stage represent those companies. There's ThoughtSpot for business intelligence. There's ASAPP for customer care. There's Factory AI for coding. Examples where you do an agent-native solution, but you put it on a part of your operations. You'll get really good benefits, but only for that part. What we're seeing at the moment in some domains, that the thinking then for the next step, and the next step is more transformational AI, has already started. What does a company look like when you run it in an AI native mode, right? What do enterprise systems, when you think of ERP and other big enterprise system space, does a company look like when we do it agentic first? We don't do it labor force first, right? It's a complete rehaul of both software architecture as well as an enterprise architecture. That's still 3 to 5 years out, but it is coming. Important for this is then to ask that what does it mean for the impact, i.e. how we can monetize the technology? And I have a very simple equation. There's potential, right, that the tools provide. That is divided by the units of change, meaning that more units, for example, individuals you need to apply the technology to, the less benefits, because it's really damn complex, times then the impact you put in. If you look at these tools, what we have found when we've done our research is something like this. The way to synthesize this slide is to say that we overestimate the benefits of the tools in short term. We probably underestimate it in long term. Long term here being only 3 to 5 years. And what I mean by this is that if I look at Copilot, here called individual augmentation, I don't know a single company that has gotten a penny from Copilot, right? There's tens of thousands of licenses, but nobody has more revenues or less costs. It's a simple reality. It's very difficult to monetize. I think when we think of workflow automation solutions like my colleagues will present, they start to have really meaningful benefits in the domain they represent. I'm a big believer that with these, you'll already get to like 3 to 5% annual productivity benefits, which is really significant for a large enterprise, and it's a lot of potential for a tech startup. However, I think the real potential also lies in how we think of more transformative AI-first orchestration of companies. And that thinking has started. So if we look at beyond, the way to think about change for an enterprise is really twofold. One, and I used to live in Japan, so sorry, I love Japanese words, is Kaizen. Kaizen means continuous improvement. It means that how do we apply technology to an existing organization? In our minds, this is speed number one. This is what every company needs to do. Speed number two is more what we call kaikaku. Kaikaku means radical change. How do we do a step change? The question, if you're a tech startup, is that how do I actually operate in these two modes? How do I actually engage my customers, be it more continuous improvement or radical change? Or if you're an enterprise, how do I actually run my enterprise in a mode like this? And while I'm doing that, how do I actually rethink the way the enterprise looks like? So there's an engagement layer, there's a decisioning layer, and there's underlying architectural layers. And we believe that it's quite a radical change that enterprises will go through as a result of that, which of course offers humongous opportunities for tech companies like you're gonna see. And finally, I wanna talk a bit about what does this actually mean for you as an audience? And remind you of the key tenets. Number one, it will be a $500 billion additional opportunity. So the global software market, depending on how you look at it, it's 600 to 800 billion. We'll see $500 billion more on top of that. And that will be captured like by new players like you're going to see soon. Second, it is still a Cambrian era. Cambrian era means that there will be a lot of companies coming and a lot of companies going. What the recipe will be is that you got to own your workflow and you got to own your domain. And that is what we're going to discuss with the CEOs, how they own their domains and how they're disrupting the legacy players. Second, last year I said that we got to move from a proof of concept to proof of value. Everybody believes the value already. The question is now, how do you scale, right? The question is literally, how do you scale the technology you have? And in my mind, that will be three things. Number one, we got to reinvent the enterprise. So we got to help the enterprise customers actually see what they need to change in addition to just buying the tech. CIO doesn't buy the tech anymore. They want to see how they monetize that. Second, this will require implementation recipes, even from tech startups. And finally, it will require really strong ecosystem and partnerships to succeed. And without further ado, can I welcome Matan, Ketan, and Priya on a stage, please. So the reason we have these three amazing CEOs here is that we were discussing with Jamie what would be a good representation after the presentation. And all of them represent, in my mind, disruptors. Companies are truly changing that what I call the domain and a workflow. So if I may do a bit of introduction. So Priya is a long-time, may I call you an enterprise technologist? You know, she actually has almost a 2-decade background from SAP. You moved from there to IBM. You went to Microsoft, after which you joined as a CTO, now CEO of ASAPP. And ASAPP is basically reinventing customer care. So one of the actually most labor-heavy industries in the world.
That's right.
Matan, you actually had an interesting background first from, remind me, Princeton, then Cambridge, then PhD in Berkeley.
Yep.
Straight from Berkeley, inventing factory AI. So what factory AI is basically, think of it reinventing coding. So how do we do software development in an enterprise? And finally, we have Ketan. And Ketan has a long history. Actually, I was going to say Salesforce, but you started at Cisco first.
Yes, I did.
Salesforce later. He, for example, if you remember Einstein in 2016, which was Salesforce's first endeavor, or not first, but the most visible endeavor into AI, he actually was the guy who built that. And now at ThoughtSpot, disrupting another area.
Yeah.
So pleasure to have you all.
Pleasure.
Thank
you for having us.
It's a pleasure.
So I'm going to start with a question for each one of you, the same question for all of you. And the question is the following. You heard what I said about reinventing with AI. Can you describe a bit, how are you reinventing your customers' operations, and what are like some real life proofs of that happening already? So we're not just hyping. Maybe Ketan. Yeah.
Well, first, thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for joining us. Ketan Karkhanis. Do check out ThoughtSpot.com. We are always looking for thoughts and feedback from everybody as we go build this company. On your specific question, look, I don't know. This is a simple example, but maybe it will. It's not about incrementalism with AI. I think so an incrementalist attitude is not going to help redefine the product stack. I think so we have to really think of this as we are in a cloud 2.0. The entire enterprise stack 5 years from now is going to be radically different than what it is today. It's almost like if you're using a BI tool like Tableau or something, you're almost like using a flip phone, a Nokia 6290, if you may. The next version is not a flip phone with a slide-out keyboard.
That's a poke towards Power BI and Tableau, by the way.
Yes. But the next AI agentic BI platform is not an incremental version of that, is a smartphone version of that redefines the experience. You don't need 10,000 dashboards in your organization anymore. You just need one Spotter agentic AI analyst And everybody now has a dedicated analyst. So that's how we think about it. And that's why customers like, I'll just give you a very recent example, EasyJet. Is a low-cost carrier in Europe. Some of you might have heard of them. They're completely replacing Tableau and moving to us. Bank of America is a customer. We have so many more customers moving off Tableau or any other legacy BI provider, because I think so the world has realized that in order to survive in this AI age, actionable insights that are pervasive and connected to every human workforce is critical. It's now, BI is no longer a back office function. It's an intelligence imperative for the front office. And that's why we are seeing success on those areas, but there's a lot more to do.
Excellent.
There's a lot more to do. I have a whiteboard in my office. Every day, somebody has to tell me one place they ripped out Tableau from.
I love it.
It's kind of fun.
So Matan,
we like to pick a fight. Okay.
So Matan, a question for you. So software development, it's probably one of the fields where you most hear about AI, but tell us what factory AI is doing.
Yeah, I think, software is probably the place that's most talked about, that's ripe for automation with these tools. I think something that's a little bit over-indexed on is the coding itself. If you actually talk to developers in the enterprise, most of their time is not spent actually writing the code, but rather understanding and planning in advance to figure out, let's say there's a big migration that they need to do that's going to take months. Most of that work is not actually typing out the lines of code for this migration, but rather understanding the right order of operations, the existing systems in place, how to actually execute this migration in a way that's separable, testable, verifiable, and I think that's something that is generally a lot less flashy because it's cool to see code streaming out, but this is something we're seeing really underserved in the enterprise.
So you're actually changing the way the organization works.
Exactly. And I think it's important because everyone is saying, software development is going to change dramatically over the next few years, and changing dramatically doesn't just mean adding AI on top of existing workflows, but rather rethinking workflows and behaviors from the ground up.
Very good. So you're in that AI native 80% benefit category.
We hope to be. Yes. Yeah.
So Priya, customer care, we all have called IVRs, right? I think we all hate IVRs in this room. I at least do. Hands up if somebody likes them. No hands up. So tell us, Priya, what is the future of customer care?
Absolutely. As Lari started, today, the complex enterprises, the largest enterprises, or the brands that you've called, they still are serving about 70% of their customer care through voice. And that is costing them about $7 to $8. No amount of technology, to your point, many augmentative technology, many real-time inserts, just-in-time dashboards, and retrieving the right information kind of helped. It was a Band-Aid, but still the problem existed. Now, okay, there was a digital channel. A lot of us are comfortable chatting, and it still cost about $4 to enterprises. Even if they're willing to pay, and as it is to begin with, IVR is almost like 4 decades old, more than 4 decades old. On top of it, we have many contact center as a service, CCaaS platforms. Good Lord, if in some enterprises we have it on-prem as well, so there is complexities. Companies are struggling to, how do I do more with less? I'm tired of being a cost center because I'm not able to service my customers. If I were to go to every single one of those contact center enterprises, can I offer you something to do more with less? Can you change your cost center to your profit center? And with real business benefits, metrics, which is like, I'll improve your containment. Containment is a term in contact centers that you're able to truly solve your problem. This is not just a cool technology thing we incorporate. It's really solving a customer problem. Even 30-point containment, you improve, and you can actually do it with less of your workforce, at least like 57% reduction. Agents are already churning. It's a tough job even for the contact center agents to be able to do it. So I unpacked a lot. So basically how we are redefining this is AI is the right candidate to solve the problem because the scale is bigger. and it's prime for automation. So anything which is digitized in the back end, we are able to automate this for our customers. And all of it passing this as a rich customer experience to many of us, because we are the ones who's calling those brands.
And the experience I as a customer get, what level is it at today? So if I would call, for example, one of your customers or your demo environment, is it on a level where I can really have a real-time natural language conversation which feels natural?
Absolutely. That's a product promise. You should not worry about how am I going to interact with the band, be it the voice or the digital chat or through any of the channels that you use, like SMS or email. You are not waiting in queue for 30 minutes for an IVR to deflect you or waiting for an agent who's picking up the voice call. Today, if you call to many of the leading airlines who are our customers in the United States and a lot of retail customers as well, you will be talking to an autonomous agent, and it works like a human and scales like a software. What we take is domain-specific, you talked about, is the latency, because it is not a normal conversation. So it is a dialogue to understand, why did Larry call me? How can I triage it? And automatically route it, go to the complex backend systems, make the calls, and not just do a simple workflow, but actually perform actions as well.
Okay, excellent. So back to Matan and Ketan. So I talked a lot about the change actually being limited about enterprises' ability to absorb it and take the change in. So maybe first question for you, Matan. So you're newest to the game, right? What are your, but you're still selling to enterprise customers, which is pretty bold. So what are your observations on like enterprises as customers? What has surprised you and what are the challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, generally the conventional wisdom, especially for earlier stage companies, is to pursue small or mid-market companies, especially, in paradigm shifts, because they'll be the earliest to adopt, they'll be the quickest that you can go and deploy with. But something very surprising that we've found is that the large enterprises, and I suspect this is partly because of maybe scars from being late to mobile, but the large enterprises seem to be the most eager to adopt agentic AI, in particular for software development. And there are a number of reasons. Like, I think one is obviously, having those scars from missing mobile, but also if you're an organization with tens of thousands of developers, there is a lot more to win or lose based on if you adopt a technology that 10x's your engineers 6 months before your competitor. Whereas mid-market companies with 50 to 100 developers, it's not as much at stake. And you also don't need to take as risky bets if you're a smaller org, because you can enact change faster, and so you can keep iterating. Whereas these large orgs, iterative improvements of like 10% aren't really worth going through the full procurement process. So if they do want to procure something, they want to know that it's going to bring them to the future. It's something that they can actually stick with for the next few years as software development is completely changed. So
I love it. Thank you. Ketan, you're at a very different stage. So I guess you guys are already quite at scale. You're a couple of years away from IPO. You also come with your Salesforce background. The company may be most known for able to create amazing momentum on the customer front. So what's your observation on enterprises and them adopting your technology?
It's a fair point. I think so. It varies a bit based on my limited observations by industry. And I was a bit surprised that I'm having regulated industries and financial services and health kind of embrace this faster than tech-oriented progressive companies. And when you see that, and then in hindsight, it makes sense because they have maximum pressure for value creation in their businesses. But I'll tell you, every AI conversation my team has is an ROI conversation. We don't really actually have the AI conversation. Whether it's the efficiency value or it's the top line value, we are always talking to our customers about, okay, how about you, instead of thinking about dashboards, how about you have a customer health tracking agent? And that agent helps you monitor customer health and always be on top of that. And what value does that translate to? I think so every time we have been very careful, we are making it about the ROI. And that's something which, Salesforce has done very well in the early days. But we are also showing them the vision for where all this will go and how they can build their technology roadmap for it. I think so painting the vision of where this is going to go is also a big need of the market. One of the two things that are resonating very well for the future is, we are talking about the autonomous enterprise. We are talking about agent fabrics that are going to be communicating and working together in your company. We are talking about amorphous experiences that are formed based on the who, the what, and the when, and driven by data. So I think so it's a combination of ROI today and vision for tomorrow. That's resonating with the enterprise, but there's a lot more to learn. I think so one of my favorite forums is the advisory boards, the AI advisory boards we are running with our customers and our prospects. Yeah. I'll tell you all my best ideas, they're not mine, they belong to my customers. It's just great. It's just great. A lot of
really
good
good
stuff coming
example.
from them.
So on this note, you all are, of course, CEOs with a very high ambition. And I think the companies are doing amazing, if I understood correctly. Can you talk a bit to the audience that as you look 2-3 years out, how do you think about scaling? i.e., I think we're all after growth, because if we achieve the growth, that means we've been also successful in helping companies through our technology. So how do you think about scaling? And what are some of the limiters you have to address to achieve that? And all of you are at different stages. So Priya, maybe you start with ASAPP.
Yeah, fantastic question. To your point, every enterprise that I'm talking to, I don't need to sell the value of automation. They get it, right? It's all about how do I adopt it internally? How do I implement it, to your point? How do I see the value of it, the business value of it? So scaling for ASAPP means, how do I show and tell more? How do I make it easy, a seamless, frictionless onboarding for the customer? How can I, because it's going to be a journey for them. There are different complexities and maturity in bringing in adoption. To your point on, today, anybody can instantly turn on very reactive type of scenarios, which is like go retrieve a complex unstructured information and go do this workflow. But full-on automation becomes, to your point of, we are not talking about co-pilots are very assistive or augmentative in nature. We are talking about integrating seamlessly to this. So how do I make it bite-sized, ready to go? Because the whole thing could be very overwhelming for enterprises. To Matan's point, they don't want to be left behind as well. So there is a complexity in what's my step one, step two. Interestingly, many enterprises are so ready, but they're also incorporating this for the first time. They are trying to evaluate probabilistic systems for the first time. They're trying to understand their data privacy and all of it. So my goal is to be able to go show and tell more, make it very easy for them to get started, quickly realize the benefit, and also bring along them and their agents being transformed as part of it to get on the journey of automation. That's what ASAPP is looking. So as many logos, and I'm very bullish about the expansion that we are doing. A customer is getting started in 1 year. They are almost like 200% more consuming the automation by themselves.
Matan.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what you said really resonates, which is amusing because we are at very different scales. But I think that's exactly right. Like the thing that we're seeing is it's not difficult for engineering leadership to understand the value here. And I think there's one caveat, which is there's kind of a lot of noise in our space in particular. So I think one hurdle that's important is just verifying that these things actually work. Because I think the AI code generation just has a little bit of some like overhyping here and there. But after crossing that hurdle and like getting through the justification for procurement, the big challenge for these engineering leaders is, okay, great, they've procured this tool, but I think to the point that you were mentioning earlier, adoption is very low. And your job as an engineering leader is not just to bring in the technology that's going to transform your organization, but also figure out ways to encourage everyone to adopt it. And I think it's the challenge is kind of doubled with the fact that these are net new workflows. So you're not just bringing in a new tool and putting it on top of an existing workflow, but you also need to encourage developers who, stereotypically are a pretty stubborn group of individuals to change the workflow that they've had potentially for the last 20 years. And so going in and trying to bring about behavioral change is very difficult. And so what we spend a lot of our time on is figuring out how we can meet them where they are and use these different touching points as inlets to these new behavior patterns that we want to encourage them to adopt. So it's a lot of time spent thinking on kind of, there's a current rails where development workflows exist, and we kind of want to slowly shift them towards this future, while at the same time, our perspective that we have a very strong stance on is developers are going to be essential over the next few years. A lot of people like talking about the fact that, or the idea rather, that developers are going somewhere or going to go away, and that's just categorically false. I think developers are going to become more and more important. They will have more and more leverage, and having that higher leverage makes them more essential and not suddenly less essential within these organizations. And so bringing about this change while also making clear that they are in control and they are essential, that's what we spend a lot of our time thinking about when it comes to scaling.
It's really interesting because when we, for example, surveyed the software industry and we asked them that what is the number one challenge for existing software companies, it is actually what Priya and Matan are highlighting, which is that how do we move from very much like a system sales motion to much more consultative selling and help actually customers realize the value. And I think in a way, both of you are building companies that are kind of value realization native, right? Because you have to argue it from the beginning to succeed.
Yeah, and this is actually why something that's been very promising for us recently has been working with consulting firms who have clients that have these needs in advance, because then there's just a lot more kind of coming to the table with the same understanding of what's necessary, which has been something I did not expect, when we first started, and B, just a very exciting avenue for us to be pursuing these days.
Perfect. Ketan, can I change the question for you?
Sure.
Ketan had an interesting, you had an interesting ambition, which is that you're obviously super ambitious on growth, but at the same time you were saying that we don't want to grow headcount anymore. This is it. So can you tell us a bit like how you're thinking about managing that wedge between growth and your organization as a CEO?
Yeah, I mean, it's a provocation I give my LT, and I'm like, okay, headcount is always the answer to every problem, is basically how conversations go. Let's have more people, which is great. One of the things that I feel, if you look at growth and scale for my company, I think of three things that are levers to really ensure we are going on an accelerated growth path. Number one is, are we becoming an AI company? And the AI company of tomorrow cannot look and work like a normal company of the past. The org chart's going to look different. The leadership structures are going to look different. How we hire, the levels we hire is going to look different. How we do our job is going to look different. Like my company builds AI products, but I am using AI every day to run my business, whether I have to go through legal contracts or everything in between. So one of the key things we are doing is, and don't go tweeting about it, but it's like roughly 30 to 35% productivity gains can come from simply using AI in every function, right from legal to HR to workplace to programming to everything. Just yesterday, we rolled out a program that in this month, every employee of ThoughtSpot is going to be AI certified, whether you're an executive assistant or a distinguished engineer. Everybody. I think so we are underestimating the need to educate and bring our teams together on this journey. I think so that's really important, and that's going to help us get more productivity also. The second growth scale factor for us is more outward looking, and this was inward. What are we changing? Is trust. I think so trust is going to be the biggest differentiator in the market. 5 years from now, most of these model wars would have subsided, and it's all going to look and quack the same. People are going to buy your product because they trust you, and they trust your platform, and it's transparent. So a huge amount of investments happening in ThoughtSpot right now. Trust is our core value, and not just trust of our relationships, but trust in our software, trust in our products. And we are investing heavily. I think so trust is going to be the killer AI feature of the future. And that's going to allow us to scale quite rapidly. And third is, just bringing our customers along for the journey. You mentioned consultative. We spend a lot of time educating our customers about all of this, helping them understand and see the world differently. So yes, it's not just the standard, let's add 30 more quota-carrying reps. Yes, that is a valid equation, but that's not how I'm building the company.
I like the example because even an AI company like you has to consciously invest into becoming AI first
100%.
and into education. So it's a good reminder for all of us.
It's like 25 years ago, remember, everybody had to learn how to use the internet? I know it feels silly when I say it, but go back in time. Everybody had to. That's the same thing's going to happen.
So my final question, and then we open for Q&A. So Matan, for you, I think factory AI has existed about 2 years, give or take. Again, I repeat what I said earlier. You're addressing the domain that is maybe most disrupted and most talked about. How do you guys stay relevant?
This is a great question. I think something that's really important for us, and again, this is very specific to AI for code or AI for software development, is focusing not on the things that are getting a lot of attention or getting hype or like, this viral demo or, this 5-year-old who built this piece of software with this tool, because those things are obviously fun and really exciting, and I think it's good for the space to kind of let the imagination get excited by these things. But for us, the reality is really in the large enterprise where the problems are a lot less sexy, a lot more brutal. They're not conducive for a fancy demo, but where if you can solve it, the value is enormous, and it makes not just the engineering leaders happy, but the developers happy, and especially, the CFO happy if they're, instead of spending 6 months on a migration, they do it in 2 weeks. So for us, the big way to stay differentiated is in a time of a lot of noise, having a lot of ruthless focus on delivering value to these less flashy use cases, but where the real developers are actually spending a lot of excruciating time. Because if you could do that, then developers will love you. So that's what we want.
Thank you. I think we have time for a few questions. Any thoughts for our CEOs here? Please. Can we...
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's on.
Larry, this question is for you. I was here last year, and your update said 6 to 8 trillion of value by the end of the decade. Today, when you presented, it was almost 3x. It was 17 to 24 trillion. So what happened? Are we accelerating faster? That's a significant change in McKinsey's point of view. So we'd love to understand what happened.
So actually the question was about, have we almost threefolded the impact in a year's time? So the total impact from AI is still the same. So I think last year what we were saying is that if you look at the impact, there was a 6 to 8 trillion from Gen AI, and there was earlier about a 15 trillion or so from AI, including traditional AI. I think what we see now is that the boundaries are first of all blurring, but the total potential to the economy is still the same, about 17 to 25 trillion. What has though changed is the speed. So actually what we're seeing is that the adoption curve is moving earlier. And I think we're seeing much more aggressive adoption when the adoption happens. Although I do acknowledge what I said, that the enterprise-wide scale, that is not proven yet. But the total potential is the same. Also why it has not grown is that we also haven't seen concrete revenue increases for legacy enterprises yet. Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Priya, Matan, Ketan, it was an absolute pleasure. I think we've had a pleasure to prepare this panel a bit, and I'm very amazed what all three of you are doing, and hopefully you're very successful. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Everybody.